Hello, friends. My name is Brian. My friends call me BG, and this is BG by the Beach. November is not my favorite month anymore. I wanted to talk a little bit today about Morgan. You've heard me mention her before if you watched any of my other videos. If you haven't watched any of my other videos, Morgan was my fiance who passed away almost 4 years ago. November 7th is our anniversary, and it's coming up. And she passed away on November 21st, 2021. This month is always a little heavy for me. If you've ever lost somebody, one of the things that helps is talking about them. Let me start with this. I'm okay. I'm as okay as I'll ever be. This is not something you ever get over. There is no going back to the world that existed before you lose your person, whether your person is your partner or your child or a parent or whatever the case. There is no going back to the world that existed before. You just learn to adjust, and you learn to live alongside it, and you learn that grief and joy and the life that was, the life that could have or should have been, and the life that is, these things have to coexist because they must. I'm okay. I'm as okay as I'll ever be. There are still days, there are still moments where it hits you hard. And November is always one of those moments. And I woke up yesterday on the 1st, and even if I didn't know it was the 1st, I'd have known it was the 1st. It's just a feeling you have. I also struggle with the balance of wanting to talk about her to keep her alive for those of us who know and love her. And at what point is this just like fetishizing the worst thing that's ever happened to me? I think probably the fact that I'm aware of that, thinking about that, means that's not what it is. And one of the things you learn is when you open the gates and start talking about this, it's a common experience for so many people, and they end up sharing their own personal stories with you when you open the door to that. Because this is one of those things that society tends to try to minimize negative emotions. There's no such thing as a negative emotion or a positive emotion. Emotion is just an emotion. It's something you feel. It's something you have to feel. And if you don't feel it, that is a problem because it will tend to come out. Whether or not you want it to, it will come out. And so one of the most important lessons I've learned over the last 4 years is you have to feel the things you feel. And this is one of those things that we kind of isolate and push down, and oh, don't talk about that. Talking to somebody once who said her therapist told her not to talk to me about this, which is just malpractice. You think I'm not thinking about this just because you don't ask me about it? No. I remember thinking in the immediate aftermath, one of my biggest fears was that she would just become a photo on the wall for, a handful of people, and that's it. No, she wouldn't be remembered. So telling stories about her is a thing that helps. It helps me. I think I've seen that whenever I write about her on social media, a little community opens up in the comments, and people talk about her. And when I post stories about her, if even one person who didn't know her before knows her after my story, that's a win. So what I wanted to talk about today was the first time I met her. We were friends for a long time before we ever got together. We were friends for years. There was a time where we were just friends. Neither of us was single. We were both in other relationships, and we just talked as friends. For 6 years, almost all of our conversations happened on Snapchat for no other reason than that's where they'd always taken place. Even though we'd been confiding in each other for years, talking about our worst moments and our darkest secrets and greatest successes, there was always this real world boundary that would just never be crossed. Why would it? How could it? So our entire friendship stayed online behind screen names, and the safety and harmlessness of relative anonymity, because that's just where it always existed. There was never a thought that the boundary could be anything other than entirely solid and unbreachable. On September 19th, 2020, Morgan added me as a friend on Facebook. and crossed that boundary for the first time. After we connected on Facebook, she mass liked every photo I'd ever uploaded with my dog Allie in it. Allie had passed away in July of 2020 at almost 15 years old. Even though Morgan had never met her in person, she loved her almost as much as I did. Whenever she was having a hard time, she'd always ask me to send her a photo of Allie because Allie couldn't take a normal photo. She just looked ridiculous in every single one. And it meant so much to me. And it was just another example of the kind of person she was. Once we became Facebook friends and that real life boundary had been crossed, we started texting each other more and more on our actual phone numbers instead of through Snapchat. After all, we're real life friends now, right? It's not just an online parasocial relationship. And one day toward the end of September, she half jokingly said, "You should come visit one weekend." And I, sure, yeah, no, that'd be great. Of course, that'd be great. Yeah, I don't know that I ever considered it a serious option. Why would I? But it started simple with little comments like that. But she kept at it. She always did. And we kept talking and getting closer, and conversations got just closer, and it became a more intimate relationship. Not like that, just the way two people get closer. And, it didn't take long for us to become closer friends than we'd ever been before. It was the holiday weekend of October 12th, 2020, leading up to that day, when it changed, and it changed the course of our lives forever. But I cannot stress this enough. Before the literal second we met, it was inconceivable that it could even be possible that it was an option. It absolutely could not happen. I lived in Washington, D.C. I had my life there for more than 11 years at that point. My job was based in D.C. It was just where I existed. And likewise, Morgan lived in Charleston. That was where she lived. That was where she existed. How could that change? Why would that change? Why would there be any crossover? How could there be any crossover? It started with texting the night of the 12th, and barely 12 hours later, what started as drunken flirting from 500 miles away ended up with me getting off a plane in Charleston. I just remember everything about it in such vivid detail. 7 months earlier, when COVID was just kind of ramping up and cities around the country were locking down, my neighbors in the Cleveland Park neighborhood in DC yearned for a way to maintain whatever human contact we could. Thus, the Song in the Yard was born, March of 2020. Every evening, neighbors would go into one of the green areas in the grass and socially distance, of course. If you remember that time in the world, someone would play a song or two and people would chat and dance around and just try to be connected in whatever way we could. On particularly nice spring and summer nights, people would bring out tailgate chairs and lounge chairs and just kind of sit in the grass and have a drink or two and just enjoy the company of other people. On cooler autumn nights, someone would bring out a fire pit and we could gather around the fire pit for warmth and enjoy some music and a few drinks. The evening of October 12th, 2020 was one such fire pit night. I had my tailgating chair with a little cooler built into the armrest. I loaded up my Truly lemonade seltzers and walked to the fire pit at the end of the street. I knew Morgan was out with her friends. She was going through a breakup. A long relationship of her own had ended the previous month, and her friends were helping her through it. She was going out and having a good time. And the messages and photos and videos of her out with her friends were flying, and she was out enjoying herself, and I was doing the same, making my way through my case of Truly lemonades, and fire grew and crackled, and the music was playing, and it was just, my neighbors laughed and talked around me, and the buzz was growing with every drink, and it was just a good night, one of those nights where if you think back to it, you can still smell the air and feel that first crisp breeze of the fall. I also noticed a little bit of a butterfly feeling in my stomach rising with every new text from Morgan. And I remember thinking, well, this is interesting. What's going on here? Her texts started picking up in frequency after she got home, and my heart was just jumping with every new message. The specifics of the conversation are mostly lost to the joy of an autumn evening buzz, but a Pixies song started playing, Debaser. And I'll just never forget it. Then my phone lit up. Morgan was FaceTiming me. My heart stopped, and I ran home from the fire pit. And it was like 10:30 or 11 at night, and she just got flirty right away. The previous month or so, had been the first time that we were both single at the same time. Without those guardrails, I guess it just didn't take much. So after about an hour of drunken nonsense, she just kind of looks into the camera on her phone and she says, "Bri, what the fuck? Why aren't you here right now?" And I just said something about Charleston being far from DC and I got to work and you got to work. And, I said the things you say. And she was, with this, as with so much else, undeterred. And she just looked at me and said, "So fix it. Come visit for a few days." And there it was. A line I'd thought of for so long, but could never cross. It was an impenetrable boundary. And now it was cracked. And look, when I was single and she wasn't, did I drunkenly flirt with her over Snapchat messaging before? Yeah, sure I did. I'd joke with her and tell her she was my dream girl, and it was a safe joke because it could never happen. Of course it couldn't happen. And she always said the same thing back to me. "I'm way too dark for you, boy. You have no idea what you're saying or what you'd be getting into." And I always said the same thing back to her. "Okay, that's fair. Why don't we just go get married and find out?" But now, the boundaries that existed before that made that joke safe no longer existed. They were no longer quite so hard and fast. And she was daring me to come visit her. And my heart was racing, and I just couldn't believe that this was happening. And I just said, "Well, I can't do that. Yeah, tomorrow's a holiday, but I have to work after that." And she said, "You work from home, work from here." Well, it's difficult to argue with that logic. It was nearly like 1 a.m. and my seltzer-fueled courage was at a peak. And I said I'd look up some flights and just kind of see what it cost. I had no idea. I'd never thought about going to Charleston before. She was going to take a shower, so I was looking up some flights. Truthfully, I really didn't think I was going to do it. This was crazy. Never mind the personal boundaries that had existed between us for so long. It was also October of 2020. If you remember that time, traveling was still kind of a question with COVID. There were so many reasons why I might not have taken her up on the invitation. You've ever heard of Aaron Sorkin? He's an Oscar and Emmy-winning director and writer of television and films. He wrote The West Wing, my favorite show of all time, and in the late 90s, he had a show called Sports Night. In one episode, Dan and Casey, the two main characters, were going back and forth over a decision one of them needs to make. Casey says he has a plan. First we show up, then we see what happens. It was played for a joke, but that line has always resonated with me. It's outcome neutral, but the important thing is showing up. We don't know what's going to happen when we get there, but we know nothing can happen if we don't show up. It's kind of been a driving force for me in my whole adult life, this silly joke from a late 90s sitcom. First we show up, then we see what happens. I'm researching flights and I see there's a round trip flight leaving at 7 a.m., just 6 hours later. It's only like $150. I just remember thinking, what am I doing? But also, why not? What do we have to lose? First we show up, then we see what happens. And I booked the flight, and it was easily the best decision I've ever made. She was still in the shower, and I called her back. She answered anyway, poking her head out from behind the curtain. And I said, "I hope you were serious about my coming to visit for a few days, because I just booked a flight, and you have to pick me up at the airport in 9 hours. And she screamed, "Oh my fucking God, yes! I'm staying up all night to clean the apartment." And she did. She texted me updates all throughout the night of her cleaning the apartment, preparing for my visit. I tried to keep my expectations low. I knew we were friends. I knew we got along. I knew we could talk about basically anything. I knew we liked a lot of the same things, but sure, our conversations had gotten a little more playful and a little flirty over the previous couple of weeks, but I didn't want to presume anything. And you never know what in-person chemistry is going to be like. It's a real thing. In my mind, I think I'm just kind of hoping for a fun few days, and then who knows? Maybe I'll visit again. Let's just see what happens, right? But then there's another side of me, the hopeless romantic who loves love. I had to have a pep talk with that side of me. And I distinctly remember just looking in the mirror and right before I walk out the door to go to the airport, do not fall in love with her on your first weekend. Just go have a nice visit and see what happens. See what happens, indeed. I packed and tried, mostly unsuccessfully, to get a couple of hours of sleep. I took an Uber to the airport and tried to control my emotions. My whole body was shaking, as much from excitement as from nerves. I walked to the airport exit. I saw her pull up in a Dodge Journey and basically skid to a stop. And she jumped out from the car and ran around. And as she sprinted around the car, I realized I'd only ever seen her on my phone screen before. I had no idea how tall she was. And she was 5 feet tall. But man, when she jumped into me, it was like she was trying to hug through me. It's like she was trying to tackle me, you know? I I miss those soul deep hugs that she gave. As soon as she hugged me at the airport, I knew. Before I even got in the car, I could tell it was some reptile brain chemical shit going on. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew for certain we were not just friends. There was an electricity in the car. It's something I'd felt every day we were together. I remember the whole drive back to her apartment. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and I'm sweating through my hoodie in the mid October South Carolina sun, and my nerves just outworking the air conditioner in the car. I would steal glances at her as she drove down the road, and her makeup was always impeccable. Later, I'd learn all the time and effort that went into that. We had many conversations about it over the course of our time together. We'd stop at red lights and just kind of look at each other in disbelief, like, oh my God, we did it. We're here. The reality was starting to sink in. She'd point out all the restaurants and bars as we drove along and that she wanted to take me to and show off her city. My pulse just spiked as we pulled up to the building. Got out of the car, I pulled my suitcase out and followed her up the stairs to the apartment. We walked in together, and her cats, you may have seen a couple of them walking around here. She calls them the boys, and she introduced me to them as Uncle Bry at the time. And the way the apartment smelled then has stayed with me since, all these years later. I could identify it anywhere. One time, 3 years after my first visit, and almost 2 years after she died, I was visiting her sister Megan, and I walked into Megan and her husband Lucas's house, and the scent hit me right away. And I turned to Megan and I said, "This is it. This is the way the apartment smelled when I first visited her." Megan smiled knowingly. She'd figured out what the fragrance was and bought a stockpile of the air fresheners. It's Glade's special autumn scent, fall night long. That's what my apartment smells like right now. 3 days of drinking and cooking and singing and dancing and just living. Everything fit. We seemed to be a perfect mix of similarities that aligned and differences that balanced each other out. She blasted 90s grunge and alternative and early 2000s emo through the soundbar so loudly I thought the neighbors would knock on the door and complain. We watched history documentaries on YouTube to fall asleep. She just loved being immersed in ancient history. I'll never forget that first night together as long as I live. You don't have to say anything to each other. We both just got in bed, and I put my right arm down. She made her back up to me, and I wrapped both arms around her. And that was the next moment. If the hug at the airport was the first time I knew something was up, that moment in bed was the first time I thought to myself, well, I'm fucked. Every moment together that first weekend was just filled with joy and excitement. Morgan exuded life. One night she was cooking dinner, a Filipino meal she was so excited to get me to try, and she loved cooking and she was so good at it. After a couple of drinks, she gets a look in her eye and she says, "How much you want to bet I could take you down and get you to tap out?" And I just looked at her, pardon? I had almost 10 inches of height and 110 pounds on her at the time. But if you know her, that couldn't have mattered less, and it probably fueled her even more. And I just laughed and I was like, "Are you crazy? Of course you could. You're trained in martial arts. I'm just a guy that likes doing curls. What are you talking about?" And she said, "Okay, fair. Can I climb you instead?" What are we doing? So she had me stand up, my arms out, and she started at my calves, climbed up over my back, climbed up my back, over my shoulder, down my front, without ever touching the ground. Dinner was amazing, by the way. Chicken adobo. And that was the story of that whole first weekend, really. We just kind of existed alongside each other as if we always had. It just was an effortless existence. We sat on the couch before she took me to the airport, and she was straddling me, and our arms and legs wrapped around each other, just trying to get as much physical contact as we could before I had to go. And she looks at me and she just says, "Bri, what the fuck do we do now? You live so far away." I just said, "So I'll come back. Flights aren't that expensive. I can make this work. We can figure this out." And she's, "I guess, but just come back soon, okay?" And what I said next changed our lives forever. Even though we'd been friends for years, we had spent exactly 3 days together. I couldn't help it. I had to say it. And I just whispered into her ear, "If I keep coming back, I'm going to fall in love with you." And she finally took her head off my shoulder and sat up to look at me. And she just smirked and raised an eyebrow and said, "Don't you threaten me with a good time." I got home on the night of Wednesday, October 14th. I didn't tell her at the time, but I deleted the dating apps off my phone. I knew I was done. So much for that pep talk I gave myself before leaving for the airport, right? We had a plan for me to go back and visit again on November 7th. It was a Saturday. That plan lasted exactly 5 days. We were FaceTiming 5, 6, 7 hours a day, almost every night. And before you know it, I had another flight booked. I was going to go back on Friday, October 23rd. And this time I was going to stay for a full week. And it was just the same dream visit as the first. We danced, we cooked, we sang, we drank, we carved pumpkins. We just lived. We were just together. By the time I got home a week later on October 29th, it was a Thursday, I told her, "It's hilarious to think I could ever be interested in anyone else after having spent time with you." But I encouraged her, don't rush. She'd just gotten out of a long relationship. I know how fraught the end of long relationships can be. It can take a while to unwind those threads. I just told her, "I just want you to know where I am. I don't need you to be there too. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'm done. I'm not going to see anyone else until I know what this is." And she said, "No, I can't imagine being with anyone else ever again. I'm done too." And just like that, we were exclusive on day 10 of our in-person actual relationship. And we spoke on the phone or FaceTime every day. And we still had our original planned visit for me to fly down there on November 7th. I was going to stay until the 12th. And this time I'd actually taken time off work so we could just be together and not have to work around my work schedule for those days. And I landed in Charleston at 11:30 a.m. on that Saturday morning. By 1 p.m. on the 11th day we'd ever spent together, we said we loved each other. And so we picked November 7th to be our anniversary. And that week she showed me more of her favorite foods from her family. God, we ate good. We ate good. Filipino food and Southern food and chicken and dumplings and oxtail stew. We hardly got out of bed but to run a couple of errands and eat and cook. And we binged watched our first show together, Schitt's Creek. And we were just together. For those keeping score, 24 days after my first visit, we said we loved each other for the first time. 51 days after that, I moved in with her. And 320 days after that, she was gone. But that year we had together. We should all be so lucky. What I'll say now is what I always think of the most when I think about our time together. And hug your people. Tell them you love them. Tell them so often they think you've done something wrong. Make it weird. We hardly existed for 10 minutes without saying it to each other. So no matter what, I know we had that. That's the story of how we met for the first time. One of the things I've learned going through this is that almost everybody has a story. What's your story? Who did you lose? What do you do to keep that person alive? There's no right way to grieve. The only wrong way, really, is to hold it in. Don't hold it in. You've got to let it out. You've got to talk. Therapy helped me. I remember sitting down with my therapist for the first time December of 2021, just a few weeks after Morgan had died. And I just remember sitting there and through just sobs telling my therapist, "Look, I believe this is going to be helpful, but there's nothing you can say that can fix the reason I'm here. There is no repressed childhood memory that we can uncover that's going to shed light on the issue. My person is gone, and that is why I feel this way, and there's no undoing that." And she just looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's right. And it's important to acknowledge that. And the only way to deal with something like this is to go through it. And so that's what I try to do every day. So yeah, thank you for listening. Tell me your stories. Who did you lose? What do you do to keep that person alive? What do you do to honor that person's memory? See you next time.